Hello, everyone. I hope my voice is audible to all of you. Um, can someone just confirm me in the chat if I'm audible? That would be great. If someone can confirm that yes, I am audible. Okay. And can someone also confirm if my screen is visible? Okay, so I assume my screen is visible to you guys. Right. So, hello everyone, and welcome to the YouTube channel of AccioJobs. Right. In this session, we will learn about basics of coding. Right. So, I have made a presentation for you. Right. In this session, we'll basically look at the front end part of it. Right. But it will be very informative, and I hope everyone learns something. Right. And I hope that there are no technical issues. Right. Uh, can someone just write no technical issues just for confirmation, and then we can move on smoothly? Just write no technical issues or no issues, something like that, so that I can move on without any hesitation. Okay, so I guess there are no technical issues. So let's just start, right? So in this session, we will look at basics of coding, right? So a little introduction about myself. I'm Ankush Gupta. I'm currently an engineer at ShareChat, right? It is a social media unicorn, right? And I work there in the revenue team, right? I work there as a web engineer. Right? I do web development there. All right. So before moving on to basics of coding, let's just understand how does our internet actually work, right? So like we are on live on internet right now. You must use internet in your day-to-day task as well, right? So let's just understand how does uh, how does the internet actually work, right? And before moving to that, let me just confirm that my screen is visible, right? My screen is visible to all of you, right? I have a PPT. I'm showing a PPT. I just want to make sure that my screen is visible. Can someone just say yes, screen is visible or screen visible or anything like that? Yes. Okay. Cool. We have got a confirmation. Thank God. It would have been a funny moment if my screen was not visible. Okay. So let's just understand how does our internet actually work, right? Right now we are live on internet, and basically like we use internet day to day, and it's important to understand how the internet actually works. Right? So internet is divided into two broad categories, that is front end and back end. Now front end is anything that you as a user interact with, and back end is the server side code plus the database, right? That is what the back end, and you front end is anything that you as a user interact with, right? So what actually happens is like front end can be of two types, right? It can be in the form of web app or mobile app, right? Basically web app, like right now we are on Google Chrome, so that's a web app, right? But you also use internet on your mobile, right? You might have the YouTube app on your mobile phone, or some games that you might have. Those are also apps, right? So basically, you as a user interact with that front end, and what happens is that front end sends a request, right, to the server. That is the this is the basically the backend part, right? This is basically the backend part. That so the front end basically sends a request to the server. Server goes to the database, goes to the file server, and checks how to basically respond to your request. So basically, the internet works on this request and response cycle. That basically the front end requests something from the user, and the back end actually fulfills that request in form of a response, right? So for example, let me just move all of this, right? So for example, let's take an example of Facebook, right? You go to Facebook and you basically want to see your homepage, right? So you request the Facebook server that, you know what, show me my homepage, basically my profile, right? So server goes to the database, it tries to fetch your profile, that he tries to find that are you a genuine user of Facebook, and then database sends a response, and then the server makes some calculations, makes some does some processing, and it serves you with your profile as a response, right? So the response here is your profile, and your request was basically to log in, right? So that's how our internet actually works. And basically, you as a user interact with Facebook's front end, right? And then the front end goes to the server, server goes to the database, and database responds to server, and server responds to the Facebook, which is you as the end user, right? So is this part clear, that how does the internet actually work? Uh, okay, I'll make the PPT full screen, but can just anyone tell if there are any doubts on how the internet actually works? Is there any doubt in that? So only then I'll move on to the next part. Can anyone tell that if there is any doubt in the basically, is everyone clear how the internet actually works? Okay, cool. So now that you know how the internet actually works, so let me just first go make it to slide. Right. So how do we do that? Slide view. Gotcha. Yeah. All right. Right. So now that we know how does the internet work, let's just focus on the front end first, right? So what in fact is front end? Let's just dive a little bit deeper. Everything that the user interacts with, like buttons, input field, etc., is front end, right? So let me take a very practical and pragmatic example. You know what? So let me take a very practical example. Let me go to YouTube, right? So let me just move this, right? So can you see that they on the YouTube page there is so much of stuff for you to interact with, right? You can see that there is a search button, there is this input text. This basically is what we call an input text. So input text, right? Where you can search something. Here we have the search button which you can click. Here we have the voice button, right? Here we have the videos. Now these videos, as you can see, are in a proper layout, right? So there you have the thumbnail. Here you have the channel icon. Here you have the basically your video name, right? And the views it has, and all that good stuff, right? So this is all that you can interact with. You cannot interact with YouTube's backend or server code, right? You can only interact with this part, which is the front end, right? So this is basically what what the front end of YouTube looks like, right? So this is what we say a front end is, right? So I hope it is clear that what a front end is. Everything that a user interacts with is a front end, right? Be it buttons, be it input fields, etc. Right. So what are different front end technologies that we can use, right? So for that we have HTML, which is basically the skeleton of your basically a web page, right? We have CSS, which acts as a basically clothing over the skeleton, right? It makes you look nice, it makes you look presentable, right? And then we have the JavaScript, which is basically the brain, right? Which is basically the functioning behind it, right? So let's actually break down the front end of YouTube, right? So let's say, uh, right? So can you see that here, right here, it is a black theme, right? YouTube has a black theme. So this is done via CSS. And can you see that all the videos are of the same size and basically length, height, and all of them are sort of same. That if you try to break down a video, each basically template that is coming, you see that this is a single template, right? Each of the video, let me change the color. Each of the video has a certain thumbnail, and then there is the video information and the channel information, and below is the channel information, views and stats, right? This is true for every single post that is on there on YouTube for you to watch, right? So this whole thing is done via CSS, right? But let's come here. This is the input text bar. Basically, you can search anything here, right? So let's say if I write AccioJobs, right? You can search anything here. You can type anything here, and that will give you stuff, right? Here we have the basically the search icon and the buttons, right? These are basically the elements, and these are made using HTML, right? So now we know what CSS does and what HTML does. Now what does JavaScript do, right? So let's say I want to click, right? So let me just write ACO, right? And if I click, right, you see I am redirected to a new page. So this all basically the logic on what to do and how to do, that is done via the JavaScript, right? It is basically the brain that it changes the state, right? So let's say if I go to any channel, so let's say I go to AccioJobs channel, right? And let's say if I subscribe it, then you see that on clicking it, the color change. Now this color change will be done using CSS, but here the stats will be changed using JavaScript. Basically, it will increment the subscribers, right? So that is basically what these front end technologies do. right? Basically, HTML gives the skeleton, CSS gives it a good look, and JavaScript is the brain behind it, right? And then you have frameworks also, right? Like React, Angular, Vue. What this basically does is that it really speeds up your development. We will not cover these in this video, but if you know this, you can learn these easily, right? HTML, CSS, and JavaScript are the basics of web development, right? These are crucial to know, right? So these are basically the front end technologies. Any doubt till now, guys, or people? Anyone can tell me if there are any doubts. Please let me know. Like, are you understanding what I'm trying to say? That what is a front end and like what does it look like and what is basically our point in this seminar, right? Did everyone understand how does the web work? Did everyone understand how what is a front end for now? Okay, Suraj asked difference between basically libraries and framework. So basically, a library is like you can say a library. Okay, so let's take a real example, right? So what is library? A library is a place in real life where a lot of books are there, right? So a library in programming language is basically a place where a lot of predefined set of functions are written, right? And you can use them as you wish, right? Basically, library sees that, hey, you know what, these type of stuff we need to do again and again. So you know what, let's just define it so that user does not have to implement it randomly, right? So one such example would be like generating a random number, or basically some algorithms could be in library as well, right? But a framework is basically it gives you the tools to basically speed up your development, right? So library is predefined code, and framework is basically that you can build anything and you can customize it to your needs, right? Will you teach? Uday asked, will you teach coding basics? I will come to this in a second. All clear, libraries. Yeah, yeah. Okay, cool. Right. So, okay. So before that, let me. So now you know what front end technologies are. So let me just tell you what we'll be doing in this session, right? So basically, we will look at the basics of HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, right? And then we will build a really cool app, right? So let me show you. We will build a fully functional rock paper and scissors game, right? Basically, here you can select any option, right? So let's say if I choose rock, right? So you play rock and computer play paper. So you know what, computer won because paper beats rock, right? So computer score increments. And if you click on paper, then basically what will happen is that we will build a game of rock paper and scissors where you can choose any of the options, and computer will choose a random option, and then your score will be displayed. So we will build this whole app in this session, right? And you don't need to worry about if you know or don't know anything. We will start from the basics of everything, right? And we will build this app from scratch, right? So that's what we're going to do in this session, right? So after this session, you would have the basic knowledge of basically HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, right? So that's how this session gonna help you. Yeah. So I hope that the scope of the session is clear, right? So let's just jump right into the coding part, right? So let's just jump into HTML, right? So okay, yeah. So in HTML, we will in this video we will learn about basically different tags and different elements like buttons and input, right? So let's see the tags, right? So let me just say for the beginning that you need VS Code for this session, right? So you can choose any code editor of your choice, but I find that the VS Code is the best one, right? Because it's very lightweight and it gives you like really nice functionality, right? So wait a second, guys. Okay, all right. So let's just look at it, right? So as we saw that HTML is what it basically defines the framework or skeleton of your web page, right? So let's just look at go one by one and look at the basic stuff, right? So we have tags. So everything in HTML is wrapped in tags, right? So there are different tags, like there are p tag, div, span, a, etc., right? So let's just look at it, right? So first you need to do is all you need to do is you need to make a file called index.html. You can basically name it anything, right? So if I basically do, let me name it, learning HTML, right? But the extension needs to be .html because it's an HTML file, right? So if you do this, right, and you can install live server, what it basically does is it helps us show the changes in live manner, right? It updates our changes in live time, right? So just go live, right? Let me just go live. Right, so here you can see that right now the basically the Chrome is empty, right? Because we don't have anything in our body, right? So basically in HTML you have your head, right, which stores all the basically the browser information, right? Here you can see that here it shows the title, right? This title is being shown in the, so let me do half an hour, right? So this title is being shown right here in the tab, right? So if I change it to, let's say, learning HTML, right? So you see that this also changes with time as I save it, right? So this title basically show whatever comes on the tab, right? So we give it learning HTML. This link is basically to attach a CSS sheet. We'll come to this later, and this is script. This is basically JavaScript code. And we will come to this later as well, right? So our main code goes into the body, right? So here we will define our elements that, as we saw in the YouTube example, right? So let's just learn about the elements. So elements are defined using tags, right? So what are tags, right? So to define a tag, all we do is we open a bracket, right? These bracket, and we define which tag we want, right? So for example, we want a p tag, right? So p tag is for basically a paragraph, right? So if I write here, let's say learning HTML, right now, right? So you can see that this actually shows up in your browser, right? And if I change this to something else, it will still come, right? So this is basically the p tag that it shows the content in paragraph form, right? Then we also have the h1 tag, which actually creates it into a heading, right? So if I do this, right, this turns into a heading round. As you can see that it is bold and it has some styling to it predefined, right? And we have like different types of style headings, right? So we basically have h1, then we have h2, then we have h3, h4, h5. Right, and as you can see that different headings have different basically size to them, basically font size to them, and different boldness, right? So these are different headings that we have, right? So this is another tag, and as I showed that p tag, right? This is a p tag, right? Then we also, right? So this is a paragraph form, right? We can write anything. We can write anything any longer that we want, right? Right, so you can see it, right? And one thing to note is that there are two types of tags in HTML. One are self-closing and one are closing. Basically, a self-closing tag does not need this, right? You do this is basically what this is basically we are opening the tag, and this is we are closing the tag, right? So yeah, that's about tags, right? Let's see some more tags, right? So there is definitely a tag. It basically helps in redirection, right? So if I do href is equal to, let's say facebook.com. Okay, so why this? I just want to go to facebook.com. It's not going right. So let's just try another one. Let's just try google.com, right? Okay, cool. If I do this, right, and link to Google, right, what happens is if I click this now, I will get redirected to Google, right? So this is basically your A tag, the anchor tag. It helps in redirecting to other page, right? And then we have the most important one, that is div and span, right? So div tag is basically used to define a block of code, right? So basically, usually what happens is that we put some stuff in div, and then we basically style that div to structure the whole content, right? So for example, I write here that I am in a div, right? So what is happening right now is that what is happening right now is that this whole content is now in a div, right? And if I copy this, right, you can see that these whole tags are in a div, right? So let's say if I give this some class, right? So let's say this is div one, and give this a class. This is div two, right? So what will happen now is if I inspect it, right, you can see that it shows me that this div right here, this is div one, and this is div 2, right? So these are divs, and basically we can give each of these elements, any of these elements, like some attributes as well, right? Like class, or basically we can also give it id, right? So id like div 2, right? And id here would be div 1, right? So the basic difference between like class and ID is that a single tag or a single element can have multiple classes, but it can only have one ID. Basically, ID is the unique identifier, right? And class is basically to you can give as many much, right? And like a general use case for it is like when we will look at CSS, we will see that class is generally used for basically applying different styling, right? And ID is basically used when we want to grab an element, a unique element in our DOM, in our JavaScript DOM, right? So basically, that's how classes and ID work, right? And you can see that these divs are coming one after another. That is because a div is a block element. That means that it will come one after another. Basically, there are two types of elements in JavaScript as well. Block elements, right, that come one after another, and then there are also inline elements that come one after another, right? So for that we have span, right? So let me show you an example of span as well, right? So if I do span, right, this is content in spam, and do the same, right? You can see that now it is coming one after another, but in the div it was coming one after another, right? Basically they are in line and these are in blocks. These are one after another, right? So this is basically the difference between div and span, right? So there are many HTML tags. You can actually just Google them and learn about them. So if I go to HTML tags, right? There are infinite number of HTML tags. You can learn them all, but these are the basic ones. And while learning, while making our app, we will also see other basic HTML tags as well, right? So this was about HTML, that how it structures our page, right? So let me just show you another tag as well, right? So there is also an image tag. Basically, if we want to show an image, right? And now this is a self-closing tag. It doesn't need anything else, right? So let me just go to Google Images. So let me just make an image. So let's take random image link, right? So yeah, so if I do this, right, basically image takes a link, right, and then it displays, right? So if I do this, and we also need to give an alt, right? Basically, if the image is not being loaded, then this alt text is shown. So we can say this is random, right? Because this is a random image, right? So now if I basically go to my page, you can see that we got a random image, right? So that's how you display images on your web page, right? So that was about tags, right? And I've already told that where you can learn extra tags. So that was basically about how HTML works, right? Are there any questions? What was this class for learning HTML? Span. Okay, Vaibhav Mali is asking span tag. So span tag is used when you want inline content, right? So let me show you again. Right, this right here, this content isn't. Oh, I wanted to write span, not span. So span is used for inline content, right? If you if you want inline content, then this will come in this, right? And if you want basically block content, then you should give your content in div, right? So that's the basic difference between div and span. How to fix image position? Okay, to fix image position, we need to use CSS, right? We will just see that in a second. But to fix image position, you need to use CSS, right? Why use class and ID in div, not in span? It's completely a choice. I was just making a point that classes are basically in general, like in practical usage, classes are used to style components, right? Because you can give multiple style. You may need to give multiple styling to a single component, but basically IDs are used to get fetch an element in the JavaScript DOM. We can add multiple pictures like that. We can add multiple pictures like that slide shows. Yes, you can add as many pictures as you want. So, okay, so that is basically to link script tag. You don't need to worry about Prajna. It is just there for basically when we will build our app, right? I will come to that in a second when we learn about basics of JavaScript. But it is you don't need to worry about it. Images has to hide with position, absolute relative, etc. Yes, we will come to this part when we come to CSS. We will learn about it. How can we display web page completely with display flex for single? Can we make a web page completely with display flex for every single time? Yeah, you can make like display with display flex, but it depends on what you are trying to do. Why is there a gap above content in this spam? Okay, so the gap is because of the image, right? The image that we got, right? So it has some height to it, right? So it is taking this height, and image, by the way, by default is a inline element. So that's why it got inline with it, right? So, and if I put it in a div, right? Right, and save this now, you can see that image actually went down, right? So that's a perfect example of how you can create basically inline elements into block elements. Yes, Ashwant asked, can we use JavaScript and HTML? Yes, you can use JavaScript and HTML. The Prince asked, what are these meta tags? These meta tags are basically for SEO purposes. Prajna asked, what's the duration of the session? This session will be 3 hours long, right? We'll end it at 6, right? So basically, we'll jump into building our app, and as soon as it finishes, we can have some Q&A, and then we can end, right? Milan asked, what is the basic difference between tags and attributes? So a tag is basically to create an element, and an attribute is in inside that, right? So let me show you another tag, right? So let me just remove comment out all of this for once, right? So let's say we have the input tag, right? So let me make an input tag, right? Now type, right? So input tag can be of many types. It can be of type text, it can be a radio button, it can be basically for email, password, and stuff like that. So this type right here is an attribute, and this input is a tag, right? So if I go to basically my JavaScript page, right, here you can see that I have this tag, right? Similarly, this input tag can take like a placeholder, right? So let's say enter your name, right? So you can see that this now placeholder will come here, right? Similarly, I can also like basically wrap it in a label, right? And let's say this is for name, right? And let me give this ID a name, right? Basically, it wants this for wants an ID of name, right? And let me just name this. Right? So when I click on this label, you see that this input gets basically highlighted, right? So that's what, so this for, this ID, this type, all of this is attribute, and this label, this is a tag, So that's the difference between attributes and tags. Attribute define the properties. Sir, how to link URL to server? Poonam, I didn't understand your question. URL to server. Do you mean like for basically to add any stuff? You need to add a tag, right? For the basically for redirecting anywhere, right? So we took an example of Google, right? Somewhere. A tag, yeah, right. So if you basically do this, right? So you can now go. Now you will be redirected to Google, right? So that's how you do that. Milan asked, "Do you prefer VS Code for beginners because of Emmet? It becomes easy to write HTML." No, basically Emmet you can install in any basically code editor. VS Code I just use for basically file structuring. Right? It has better file structuring, so that's why I use VS Code. Right. So I hope like basically what HTML does is clear to you, right? So basically there are different tags you can read about them online, but that's about HTML, right? So let's go on to CSS. So CSS, as I told, that it basically does gives styling, right? So in this video, we will in this session, or should I say, we will look at basics, right? Basic selectors, basic CSS, and box model, right? So let's just jump right into it, right? So there are three types of CSS, right? One is basically inline CSS, one is internal CSS, and one is external CSS, right? We usually use external CSS in our day to day, right? So let me show what does that mean. So let's say I basically make a div, right? And let's call style, let's say height, let's say let me give it some color, right? So color, let me give it red, right? And let me give it right, and let me add some content. This is internal embedded CSS. So where was my right? You can see that this text got displayed, and we have our color as red, right? So this is what we call embedded CSS or internal CSS, right? Sorry, inline CSS. I meant inline, not internal, right? One another way is also that we do it here, right? We declare some style, right? And let's say I want to give this background color as aqua, right? So this is what we call when basically the CSS is inside the HTML document in this form. This is what we call internal CSS. And one another way is basically to link our CSS sheet in a different file and then execute it, right? So that this way is called external CSS, right? We use external CSS because it is cleaner and like it is more readable as a developer, right? So if I basically do something like what should I do? Basically, if I just cut and paste it here, right, and let me just change it to yellow to show the difference. Right, then now you see that it turns to yellow, right? So these are basically the three types of CSS that we have, right? So let's just see some basic selectors on how this works, right? So just for reference, any CSS that I will write here, right? And then, right, let me just note this as well. Right. So let's just basically learn about selectors. Right. So basically, to get any element, right, we have selectors, right? So let me give this div a class like div, or you know what, box, right? And let me give it an ID of, let's say, ID box, right? And let me give this class box, right? So basically, if I want to fetch this element in my CSS, what I will do is I can either do dot class box and then parentheses. Now what this does is it basically picks up this element due to this class. Basically, the syntax is that to pick up any element by class, you need to do dot and class name. Right. So now if I do basically background as let's say red, right? So you see that the background changes to red, right? And if I do background color as let's say aqua, you see it changes to aqua, right? And you can also change the basically the text color. So wait, color, right? So if I do this as brown, it will change. But you let me just increase the size of my screen. I hope it is visible. You can see that it's brown. So let me change it to yellow. So you can see that it changed to yellow. Basically, we selected this box using the class, right? And for that, the basic syntax is dot and the class name, right? So here the class name was class box, right? And what if we want to select some div using ID, right? So what we'll do is we'll do hashtag and we'll do ID dot box, ID dash box. So it basically something like this, right? So if for basically IDs we use hashtag and ID name, right? So now if I do let's say background color to my aquamarine, right? So it changes to aquamarine, right? And if I do color as black, it will change to black, right? So that's how you query this, right? And what if we want to basically query some element, right? Let's say we want every div to be certain way, right? So basically we want every div to be a certain way. So we can just write that name and we can let's say height equals to 100 pixels, right? So you see that the height increases for every div. Basically, if I make another div here, right, and this is div 2, right? You so let me just give it some class, right? So let's say it is div 2, right? So if I basically dot div or you know what, even better, background color equals to blue or violet, right? So you see that now each div will have a violet color if not already defined, right? So that's how you basically pick up elements, right? So basically, if you want to pick up elements, just write the element name, right? And let's say you want to pick up all elements, right? So you just do star and let's say font size equals to 100,000 pixels. Oh, it is too much. 100 pixels, you know, 50 pixels. So you see that every text in this document will now have the font size of 50 pixels, right? So this is to uh, basically change all elements, right? If you want some global properties for it to have, right? So these are basically about the selectors. That when we'll make a project, we will look at more of this. But and these are basically the different attributes that we have. Basically, we have color, background color, position, height, and stuff like that. We'll see when we'll make our project. We'll take it one by one. Right? But does what? But this is basics. This is the basic of it. I hope this much is clear. Any doubts till now? Any doubts, guys? If you have any problem, if you are facing any doubts, do let me know, right? I know that if you don't know this, it might be coming as a surprise, or you know what, you might be getting some doubts, but trust me, when we start making the projects, this will start becoming immensely clear, like how does a live project actually work. So Dipanshu Bish asked, is there any certification of this? Yes, there is a certification. You can basically attend, basically fill the Google form, and you will get the certification. Right. Right now, I'm just telling about what are the different technologies and how do they work. Right. So that's about it. Vaibhav Mali asked of use of div tag. So we use a div tag when we to enclose some stuff inside of it, right? And we want that content to be blocked, right? When we want that content to be blocked by block, that's when we use a div tag. So in this session, right now we will discuss about HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. I will move on to JavaScript the next. Right. I- uh, in this class, not anything about Java basics. No, we won't discuss about Java basics. We will discuss about JavaScript. Sachin, is there a session people with zero knowledge for those who already have it? Is this session for people with zero knowledge or for those who, like basic for zero knowledge is also fine because we will like I will whatever I will do I will explain this, right? Dushyant Tyagi asked, "What will we make a project in the session?" Yes, Dushyant, we will make a project. Can tell to create a GitHub. Yes, Devil Gaming. I will also show how to basically upload your project on the GitHub. Right, that we will do. That I'll do. What is the role of HTML CSS in a company? Okay, so Rajesh asked a very like cool question, right? And like as a fresher, you might not know, but like HTML CSS is really important. Like my work, if I tell you about it, in at ShareChat, I basically build ads, right? So for that, I primarily use HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, right? Ads like basically ads of Dabur. I also created ads for Brahmastra movie, right? I also created ads for Snickers and stuff like that, right? So those ads are actually created in HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, right? So I, as a front-end developer, use these technologies on a day-to-day basis. How to insert a background image? Okay, so let me Prajna Shetty asked that. So let me just show you, right? So it's pretty simple, right? What we need to do is we need to do background image, and if you want to do it via URL, what you need to do is only insert the URL. So let's just take what we have from this pixel, right? So if I do this, right? So now as you can, so okay, so now as you can see, so let me just remove the content, right? Uh, where it go? Right, now you can see that there's a random image and this is the background. Basically, it is repeating itself, right? You can also add a property of no repeat, but that's how you basically insert the background by basically going to the styles and placing the background image. If you have it in your assets, then you can do that this way, basically the other way, or if you have a URL, you can do it this way, right? So that's how you insert background image. Okay, so let's just move on to JavaScript, right? Then okay, so let me just remove all of this code. Uh, Let me remove these divs. Okay, so as we discussed, basically JavaScript is the brain behind our app, right? So there are two ways to write JavaScript. One way is basically to link a JavaScript file like we are doing right here, like logic.js, right? Other way is basically we can also just write script and we can write anything here, right? So if I write console dot log here and hi there, if I write hi there, right? So then this stuff will be applicable in your console, right? So you can see hi there from learning HTML, right? So these are the two ways. Basically, either we can write it under the script tags, or we can basically link our file like this. And if I basically write console dot log I from another file, and this will be displayed as well, right? I from another file, right? So these are the two ways. Dipanshu Bish asks, can you suggest a project on zero hunger? I don't know, man. I guess like this is question like not, you will have to really think about it, like which implementation side do you want to go? Do you want to basically solve the operations problem of it, like basically build a tool for better food chain, or do you want to build a user facing brand where like someone can go and think that hey, I'm in this location and I need food, right? So there are multiple aspects to it, right? So basically you will have to see which side do you want to go in. Did Sir get hacked? No. Can projects are required for jobs? Yes, Vaibhav. In basically your resume, projects are required so that the recruiter can see what all technologies you have worked on and what all you can build. Right? Why we use console to view just why not on our web page? Basically, uh, basically console.log is like a statement, right? Basically, it's a function. So you can print anything on the console, right? So even you know what? If I bring the console here, here also the console is working. So if I let's say I write console dot log, we are in the console. It will actually print this, right? We are in a console, right? So this is basically why we use it. Okay, M Phoenix OP asks difference between console.log and return. So console.log basically prints anything logs, or I should say logs anything to console, and return statement is actually used in functions to return some data or actually to return from the function itself. Right. Okay, cool. So let's just jump to JavaScript, right? So in JavaScript, to basically, as I said before, to basically, let me show it. Where is my, yeah. So to basically show anything to the console, we have console.log. Right? So let me delete this. Right. So let's just talk about first thing first, that is variables. So variables is defined in two ways in JavaScript, right? So the first is using let, bar, and const. Right. So yeah. So let's see them one by one, right? So let's say I said let age equals to 10, right? And if I log this, right, age, let's see what happens. You see, I got 10, right? Because age is equal to 10, right? And if I let's say change age equals to 11, right, and log it, you will see that I got 11. So basically, let's you define variable that can change its value, right? But let's try the same thing with const, right? So let's say const name is equal to Ankush, right? And I log this name, right? And let's say I try to change the name to let's say Sahil, right? And then I try to log the name again, right? You see that we got an error that assignment to constant variable. Basically, we cannot change or reassign a value to a constant variable, right? So you cannot change a constant variable, right? It is defined as it is, right? So that's the difference between let and const, that you can actually change the content of let, but you cannot change const, right? That's the low level definition of it. Right? And let's see it with var as well, right? So basically, I will never recommend you to use var in your modern development. Avoid it, but it also works similar to let, right? The main difference between them comes in basically their scoping, right? That is a advanced topic. You can leave that right now. But their main difference actually comes in scoping, right? Basically, let is block scope, whereas var is global scope, right? So if I do var, let's say hobby, right? So if I do it singing, right, and log it, log hobby, right, and let me just comment this because this won't work, right? And if I then change my hobby to let's say dancing, right, and I log this, so hobby, right? You see that it works, right? The above also works, the below also works. Only this one works. Why? Because we cannot reassign a const, right? So that's the high level difference. Are there any doubt? Is everyone clear that basically how to declare a variable? The basic syntax is that you use, okay, so you use either let var or const, right? And then variable name. And that's how you declare a variable. So basically const, uh, let's say laptop, and that can be HP, right? Now that's how basically you display a variable, right? Now let's come to data types. Right. So there are different data types in JavaScript, right? Like a number is a different type of data type, string or even float and stuff like that, right? So let's see them one by one. So let name equals to Ankush, right? That's a string. That is a string, right? Let age equals to 18. That is a number, or you know what, an integer. Let marks or percentage equals 99.99. This is a decimal, right? Then we also have like boolean, right? So let flag equals to false, right? This is a boolean. It can be basically true or false only, right? So these are the basic data types in JavaScript. Any doubt? Any doubt, guys? Okay, so Shubh Joshi asks, why name is strike through? It's basically due to my code, basically my VS Code settings, right? So it doesn't allow to use like, how should I say this? Like repetitive or non-informative names, right? So that's why you don't need to worry about it. Can I use console.log and document? What is it? Document.write to interpret the same way. No. Document.write is a completely different thing, right? These are basically different APIs as well. Console is of different API and document of different API. So these are not the same. Difference between let and var. Okay, so Ranjan asked a very good question, that what is the difference between let and var, right? So like let is defined in a block scope and var is defined in a global scope. Like I know that this doesn't make much sense right now, right? Basically in modern JavaScript we try to use let as much as possible and avoid var, because var was invented a long time ago, right? So like we won't get into the nitty gritty details, but my recommendation would be to use let and not var, right? But the main difference between them is that let is defined in block scope, whereas var is defined in global scope. Basically the main difference comes when you read about stuff like hosting and closures and stuff like that. Sachin asks, sir, I recently started coding with AccioJob from the last 10 days. So how I can understand what R teach now? Okay, Sachin. So basically, this is just a session where I will make a project, right, and just describe what I'm building and how the stuff works, right. So I think it will be informative for you. Let is a variable type. No, let is not a variable type. It is how you declare a variable which can be reassigned, right? So basically, in JavaScript, there is no strict defining of variable type, right? So let's say, for example, in C++ and Java, you actually have to discretely tell what type of variable it is, like string, integer, boolean, and stuff like that. But in JavaScript, it can be of basically any type, as long as you are using const and let, right? And which brings me to another cool data types. Those are basically arrays and objects, right? Wait a minute. Okay. Okay, let me just move my epic pen. Yeah. Okay, cool. Okay, so arrays and objects, right? So first let's look at arrays, right? So arrays are basically a set of data. So if I do const uh, peop or office people, right? So that can be like Jim, Dwight, Andrew, Michael Scott, right? And if basically I log this, you will see that we get all of this, right? Basically, you get an array which has these, and these are basically the indexes, right? So let me just show bigger here. These are basically the indexes that Jim is at 0, Dwight is at 1, Andrew is at 2, and Michael Scott is at 3, right? So let's say if I do office people of 0, so it will display basically Jim, right? If I do basically 2, then it will display Andrew, right? That's how basically arrays work, right? So basically arrays work like const or let or bar, right? Then array name equals to this, like this represents an array. Even like if I do this, this is also an array, right? This is an empty array, right? Length 0, but you see that this is an array, right? And to access an element, we just do array name and the index we want to basically capture, and indexing is done 0 based in JavaScript, right? Any doubts in arrays? How do we declare them and how do we use them? Musical beats asks, can you code array case repeating element? I can actually code that, but this session is not for that. This is not a data structure algorithm session, right? That will happen in future. This is basically a sort of web development session, right? So we'll avoid that. Okay, cool. So if arrays are clear, let me show you objects, right? These are really cool, right? So let's say you want some detail to be displayed of a user, right? So how do you do that? So to do that, let me just open that. Yeah. So what we do is for that we have objects. So what we do is let personal info, right, and then equals to me. We do a parenthesis, and then they have basically key value pair. Key value pair. Right? So a key can be something like name, right? So that's Ankush, right? It then comma for another last name, that can be Gupta, right? Then let's say company. So you know what, ShareChat, right? Then age 21, 22, sorry, right? So and if I log this person info now, right? You can see that we got this all personal info, right? Age 22, company ShareChat, last name Gupta, and first name Ankush, right? And I can also access this via dot. So like let's say if I want personal name of age, right? Personal info dot age, so it will give me the age, right? Let's say if I want personal info dot company, right? So it will give me the company, right? So you can access a particular instance using dot and the field that you want, right? So basically, an object dot key that you want, right? So you can also access using that. Any doubt in basically object and arrays? Any doubt, guys? Any doubt? Please do let me know if there is any doubt. All right. So this was about JavaScript, right? This was about JavaScript, right? So let's now look at DOM manipulation and event listings. Like, or you know what? We look at it when we make a project, right? So this was all about basically what we will learn in this, right? So we basically learned how does the internet actually work, what is front end, what is basically different HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, right? So let's just start building our project, which is the rock paper scissors game, right? So we will use only HTML, CSS, and JavaScript to build this. I hope that's fine. So Suraj Captain is asking, can we use Java for backend? Yes, you can use Java for backend. I think you have Spring framework for that, so that goes on well, very really well with Java. So you can definitely use Java for backend. All right. So let's just start building the game. You know what? Right. So let me show what our game would actually look like. Right. So it will have this heading, right? Then it will have these set of rules. So basically, we have our heading as rock, paper, and scissors. We have our basically paragraph that is as rock beats scissors, paper beats rock, and scissors beats paper, right? And then we have these options, right? So we can click on anyone, and it will show that you played paper and what computer played, and then we will update our score, right? So if I play scissors, so it will show that I have played scissors and computer played rock, so computer won, right? So computer score got increased, right? If I click on rock, then I played rock and computer played paper, so computer won, right? So that's how the score will get updated, right? So if I click on paper, you played paper and computer played rock, so that's how I won, right? So that's how the score will also get updated, right? So this is what we're gonna build, right? So is there any doubt till now, right? If there is, do let me know. So why don't you teach DevOps as dev down? They said place DevOps. What? Please don't spam the chat, right? Uh, this is not a DevOps session. DevOps is not for freshers. DevOps is not the first thing that you should learn when you learn to code, right? DevOps is basically for continuous integration. When you want to integrate your front end with back end, that's where DevOps comes, right? So that's why I'm not teaching DevOps, right? This is a very beginner session on coding. All right. So let's just build this, right? So let me just open that once again, right? So let's just try and focus on getting all of the stuff down, right? So let's just get this heading, right? So rock, paper, and scissors, right? So we want this heading. So in the body, right? Everything in your HTML will go in the body, right? So we have H1, right? So so we would say rock, paper, and scissors, right? And does it show? Oh, okay, so let me just go live on this. Right. So we got our heading, right? And now we want the rules part, right? So let's say paragraph, right? Rock beats paper. Sorry, rock beats scissors. Scissors beats uh, paper, and paper beats rock. Right. So you can see that we got a paragraph as well, right? Now we basically want this core thing, right? So what we can do is we can basically make a div, right? And in that we will have a p tag which is initially zero denoting the score, right? And we'll have another p tag basically denoting u, right? Okay, so let me just remove anything from my CSS. Right. Okay, very good. So now we have this rock, paper, scissors, we have the rules, we have this part which shows the score, right? So you know what, actually it would be better if I do this. Right. U0, and this is our score, and same for basically computer. Initially all scores are zero, right? And then what we have these options, right? So let's make another div, right? And fill all the options here. So button, right? So rock, paper, and scissors, right? So these are basically the buttons that we have, right? And now you can actually see that how did we create these elements, right? Basically, we are putting all the stuff that we want together in a div, right? We will style it later, but that's how basically the development is done, right? we have a heading, so we want a heading, so we use the HO tag. We wanted rules in a paragraph form, so we used a P tag. We wanted basically this scoring mechanism, right? So we use a div, right? So we have basically you denoting your score and the score part, right? So that's how we do stuff, right? Then we wanted all the buttons together, so we put them in a div, right? And let's just put the right who let initially let the game begin, right? So this part is basically it will initially it is let the game begin, right? But in the when you play something, it will show what you played and what your computer played, right? So that's how it's gonna work, right? So that is basically the structure of my web page, right? Pure HTML looks like this. There is nothing beyond this. This is what pure HTML does. And we will actually, I will convert it in front of your eyes, this thing to this thing, right? Using CSS and JavaScript, right? But is the HTML part clear? Is anyone having any doubts? Sir, can we use section if both are same or not? Okay, so section like if I talk on a high level, yeah, you can use section or div, right? But div like it's just a matter of choice. You can actually even use anything to nest stuff, but div is really powerful, right? Divs. So I would really suggest to use div. Okay, so Parag ask the difference between let and var. So Parag, actually you can Google it, right? Definitely you can Google it, but I will repeat it again. Let is hosted in basically block scope. It has block scope. It comes into like a temporal dead zone that it would take at least an hour to explain the actual difference between let and var, right? So you can just for now remember that let has block scope and var has global scope, right? And the actual difference comes in basically their hosting, right? So you can actually read upon it if you want. Like I can actually you can just Google let versus var hosting, right? You can basically read whole of this and you will see what the actual difference is, right? It is a really important question as far as interviews are concerned, but because it is a really important question, it also takes a lot of time to explain what is the actual difference between let and var. I know the session HTML wanted to tell C syllabus alma mater like beach and okay, okay. If we click the buttons, can score get changed? Yes, Supreme Ravi. We will actually this functional. This is functionality, right? This is functionality. You want to click buttons and you want something to happen. So this will be done using JavaScript. So you told that we can use div, we can write line buttons. Okay, because because the buttons are inline element, divs are block element, but buttons are inline element, right? So if I page div after div, right? So if I do this and then this, you will see that the buttons appear below this, right? These appear below it because this is a whole div and this is a whole div, right? So let me show in the that as well, right? So this is a div and this is a div. So this is one below another, right? So but buttons are inline elements, so these come one after another, right? So I hope this is clear. Rakesh, that the div after div will come one after another, but div content will come as they are. So button are inline elements, so that's why they come one after another instead one on another, one on another. Okay, cool, right? So our HTML part is actually done, right? So let me just remove the extra div that I made. Okay, cool. Right. So you know what? Now I will before moving to CSS, I would actually like to move to the JavaScript. Right. So in JavaScript, right, what we need to do is what do we want actually? We want that we need to make some move and then the computer needs to make some move and then we want the result. Right. So definitely it makes sense that you know what gives this some ID, right? So this I am giving this idea of raw. Right. Let me give this ID of paper. Let me give this ID of scissors. Right. So now what I want to do is I want to track. these events, right? So how do I do that, right? So what we do is we first of all capture these buttons, right? So let's say rock button. So to capture the rock button, what I'll do is I'll do document dot get element by ID, and I'll mention that I want the rock button, right? So let me just log this and show you what do I get actually. So if I log the rock button, let's see what do we get, right? So let me go to console, is the size. See, we got the rock button that is right here that we have defined. This we got, right? So to add some event to it, what we do is we do rock button dot on add event listener. What event do we want? So there are different events that can play, click, close, and stuff like that. We want the click that when we click this, do something. So it takes a function inside it, and let's just say log you click rock. Right. So let's see what happens. So whenever I click rock, you see that we console that you click rock. Right. So now we are tracking that whenever we are clicking the rock button, then console this. Is there any problem? Is there any problem in what we just did? Now we can change the color or font and background. All right, I hope this is clear that what we did is that we fetched this button from the document of our HTML by ID that we provided that was raw, right? And then we added the event listener of click that we want to listen for each click on this button, and on that we will log this, right? So let's do this for every other button as well, right? So basically const paper button equal to document get element by ID paper, right? And const scissor button is equal to document dot get element by ID scissor, right? And now basically we'll do the same thing for each button, right? Basically we'll change this to scissor, scissor, right? And we'll change this to paper, right? So now if I go to my app, if I click on drop, I get Euclid drop. Why is not paper working? Did I do something wrong? Paper, paper scissor, paper scissor not working. Why is that? Okay, so it's scissors. First of all, yeah, so scissor is working and paper is also working. Okay, so if I click on rock, it says that you clicked rock. If I click on paper, it shows that you clicked on paper. And if I click on scissor, it shows that you clicked on scissors. Right. So now we are tracking each and every event. Right. So let's just make a function of a game engine, right? So we'll write function. The name of the function is let's just say game engine, right? And we'll mention here your move, which is the parameter, right? And now what do we want? We want that the computer should also have a random move, right? So I'll make an array of possible moves, which is equal to basically paper, rock, and scissor, right? Let's just call it scissors. Right. So now I want that my computer should have a random move. So what I'll do const computer move is equal to moves of math dot floor math dot random times 3. Now what this function basically does is, so math dot random gives me a value anywhere between 0 to 0 till 0.99. So basically if I do math dot random, right, this function will give me a value between 0 and 1, 1 not being included, right? So this whole will give me a value between 0 till 3, 3 being excluded, and the floor of it will give me the index. So right, so this whole gives me a random index, and that random index would be either 0, 1, or 2, right? So that becomes my computer move actually. So now I have a computer move, and now I have a your move, which I will pass on here, right? So if I do like gaming, game engine, and this was raw, so I pass raw, right? So similarly, if I do like game engine and I do paper, sorry, scissors, right? And if I do like game engine and I do like paper, right? So now I'm passing here, right? So I definitely have my move, and I have the computer move as well now, right? So now I just need to basically increment my score, right? So I will also make two variables. Let your score, basically our score is equal to 0 initially, and computer score initially 0, right? Uh, and also let's get this div right here, right? So to get this div, what we'll do is we will add an ID to it, right? So ID equals to result. So if I get result here, right? So document let me const result area will be document dot get element by ID result, right? And let's just get some other stuff as well, right? So let's just get this part. So ID here is equal to your score, and ID here is equal to computer score. Let's just get this as well, right? So const your score HTML equals document dot get element by ID your score, right? And const computer score equals to document dot get element by ID computer score, right? So let me just do it, right. So this is how we will basically increment this, right? So basically, like if I do your score dot element dot inner HTML equals to your score, right? And let's say if I do this 10, right? Uh, like what happened? Okay. We'll use template strings here. Oh, okay. We put it on the wrong thing. So this we have to put it on. It why is not working? Okay, yeah. So you see that it actually changed, right? So basically, this function is so if I do like game engine, anything like your move, right? If I pass anything, right? You see that we are changing this, right? So if I put a variable on this dot score, now it will show the value of this variable in my this part always, right? So initially this should be 0, so I will set it to 0, right? And same thing for basically computer score HTML dot inner HTML. Right? So if I basically do this equal to 10, so it will change this value, right? So, but we don't want that. I just want to show how we will increment the values. Right? So now, okay, so now we know how we can increment our values. We will basically update them to the computer score that we are maintaining, the R score and the computer score that we are maintaining. Right now we have the move, right? So now comes the basic task, right? So if basically your move is equal to, let's say, paper, right? Then I then basically now what is happening is that as we saw in the rules, right? So rock beats scissors, scissor beats paper, and paper beats rock, right? So if my move is paper, so if basically computer move is equal to let's say scissor, right? Then computer score will be incremented, right? Because computer won. Else, if computer move was equal to rock, then I won because rock paper beats rock. So your score will be updated. Else nothing happens, right? So else it is a tie, right? Nothing happens. Right. Now our move can be not only paper, it can be rock and scissors as well. So else if your move is equal to rock, right? Then let's just copy it. Right. So computer score plus plus, that is we lose. So what does rock lose to? It lose to paper. So if computer move is paper, then computer score plus plus. And if computer move is what is the R win condition? So rock beats scissors, right? So it will be scissors. And else, basically the last option that if we pick paper, right? So in that case, what would be the computer win condition? It would be scissors, and computer lose condition would be, so we were picking paper, right? So it picks rock, right? So yeah, right. So let's just try to play this, right? So in each instance, let me just console log what moves are we getting, right? So let's just console your move and computer move, right? So let's just see what is happening right now. So okay. So you click rock, so and the computer picked scissors, right? So we won. So our score got incremented. I hope you're able to see this, right? So if I pick paper, so we clicked on paper and the user a computer also picked paper randomly. So nothing happened, right? And if I pick scissors, so I picked scissors and computer picked rock. Wait, so why did I win? So let me see. In case of scissors, right, so this was for paper. Okay, so this was for scissors. So if okay, no, no, no. So if we are picking scissors, so for rock it should be this computer wins, and for paper we should win that. Now it should be correct. Right? So for scissors, raw, we see that computer won. Right. So we have made our game engine pretty well. Right. So now what we want to do is, yeah. So let's just we took the result area, right? So basically result area equals to, we use a template string, you pick your move and computer pick computer move, right? So see everyone, now initially this is let the game begin, right? And if I click rock, oh wait, something happened. Wait, was it not getting this? Oh, so this should be dot inner html, right? See, you picked rock and computer picked scissors. We pick paper and computer pick paper. Basically, the computer move is completely random, and we pick the option that we are clicking on, right? So that is our game engine, right? So is there any doubt in that? Is there any doubt in this? Prajna asks, is giving ID necessary? Yes. If we want to pick that element in the JavaScript document, Then giving ID is necessary. You can also pick using query selector, using class, but using ID is the professional way of doing this. So MP Phoenix asks arrow function versus normal function. So normal functions are defined in basically all the older functions of JavaScript as well, but arrow functions were derived in the basically ES 2015 plus onwards. These are the comparatively newer functions. दोनों को कैसे यूज करना है दोनों both have the same rule, right? So basically in arrow function, let me just tell you, I did use arrow functions somewhere, I believe. Yeah, so basically in arrow functions, so you know what, let me just show you. If you write arrow functions in JavaScript, right? It is pretty straightforward that you write the variable name. You write the variable name. The variable name which acts as a function name equal to the parenthesis for basically your variables, then an arrow, and then the nested bracket for your code, right? So basically, it is something like this. It is something like so. Let me just- Right. So arrow functions is something like this. Arrow functions are something like this. That const, let's say, function name equal to arrow. Here you can have your parameters, then another arrow, right? And then the code, basically your code. This is how you do arrow functions. Nice question. I think I did not tell about it, but nice question. I understood. Can we rewatch it from starting after? Yes, Supreme Ravi, you can rewatch it. Difference between section or div or when to use it, how do we decide? So basically, I would say that you know what, there's a common meme in the front-end web dev community as well, that you know what, you can put anything inside div, right? So section is basically outdated. Everyone uses div in a day-to-day life as well, right? So you can actually read more about it on internet. So you know what, let's just Google it right now. So what is the difference between section or div? Right. Section tag means that the content inside relates to a single theme, and div tag is used to block part of web page. Like I don't think there is like basically it also says that div you can use like section you will have to define that what is a particular section, right? But div you can use for anything, right? Be it as a small like single component or multiple components you want to stack in basically wrap inside one another. That's how you use div, right? So my personal recommendation would be don't like go into that deep like how these components are too different. You can like put anything inside a div. Yeah, Bhanu, I can show the code once, right? So this is basically the code, right? So basically these are all the HTML elements that I have curated, right? Then these two variables show the state of basically your code and the computer's code. This is basically the gaming engine, right? Which basically how the game is played. Like if you pick paper, then what happens? If you pick rock, what happens? If you pick scissor, what happens, right? And yeah, right. So in case of tie, you know what I'll just do? I'll do this was a tie, right? Because both picked same, right? So if I copy this everywhere, right? So if I try to play my app, right? So if I pick rock, rock, rock. Okay, I think this was okay. Wait. Oh, just a tie came right. Wait. Initially, we can actually, you know what, put it empty. Wait. How? So okay, so we need to do a tie, right? So you took okay. If it is a tie, then you know what, just return. Return and So this was the type of what to say, like why it is coming. Okay, okay, okay. I thought I okay, okay. That's why it was coming. Okay, so let the game begin. Scissors. So both pick same. So this is not showing. This was a tie, right? So I was to show this. I was calling this function initially. So that's why this was coming. Okay, cool. Right. So this was the code. MD दानिश सिर्फ हिंदी नहीं आती क्या ब्रो मेरे को हिंदी आती है राइट आई थिंक दिस सेशन इज सपोज टू बी इन इंग्लिश राइट आई इफ एवरीबडी वांट्स वी कैन डू इट इन हिंदी एज वेल राइट अगर आपको कोई भी डाउट है मैं उसको हिंदी में ले लूंगा राइट दैट इज नॉट एन इशू बट लेट्स कीप इट इन इंग्लिश राइट बिकॉज दैट व्हाट आई वाज इंस्ट्रक्टेड टू राइट बट डेफिनेटली वी कैन डू इट इन हिंदी एज वेल ब्रो मेरे को हिंदी आती है right. Anyways, moving on, right. So our basic functionality is done, right. So we have wrote the JavaScript code and we have wrote the HTML, right. This is basically what a website, a functioning, fully functioning website looks like, right. So now what is left is making it pretty using styles, right. Any doubt up till now कि ये कैसे हुआ या फिर how like कोई JavaScript वाला part समझ में आया कोई HTML वाला part समझ में आया हो guys. Any doubt guys? Yes, Prajna, I will share the GitHub link. I will also show you guys how to upload on GitHub, and then I will share the GitHub link. Any doubt till now, guys? Okay, so let's just move on to the CSS part, right? So the CSS part is quite interesting in this, right? So let me just open another window. So for CSS, I'm thinking of going in a different way, right? So let me go to desktop file, and this file, the folder. So let me just put this hole and just paste it here, right? So let me comment all of this out, right? So you know what? Let me just even remove this and this, right? And comment this one out, right? Okay. So now I've pasted some CSS, right? Let's just see how our page now looks like. You can see that wow, our page literally changed, right? So let's just break it down one by one. That CSS कर क्या रहा है, right? How is the CSS working, right? So the first property is font family. हमने font family को monospace में change कर दिया. Initially it is like I believe Times New Roman. You can get any font family from font awesome, right? So basically you can take any font family that you want, right? So इसमें हमने monospace कर दिया. इसके अलावा भी बहुत सारी options होती हैं जैसे टाइम्स न्यू रोमन सेरिफ ये कर सकते हो तो पूरी फॉन्ट फैमिली चेंज हो जाएगी राइट या देखो ये चेंज हो गई राइट एंड इफ आई चेक लाइक समथिंग एल्स राइट जॉर्जिया राइट सो अगेन थोड़ा सा हर किसी में अलग अलग चेंज आता है बट आई बिलीव लाइक मोनो को मेरे को पर्सनली बेस्ट लगता है इसलिए मोनो स्पेस सॉरी तो इसलिए आई यूज दिस राइट. Then font size. Basically, it determines the font of each text as the name suggests, right? So इसको 20 से अगर मैं 30 पिक्सल कर दूँ तो सब कुछ बड़ा बड़ा हो जाएगा राइट एंड सिमिलरली अगर मैं 10 कर दूँ तो इट विल एवरीथिंग विल बिकम स्मॉल राइट सो दैट्स हाउ द फॉन्ट size works so you can basically build it for your own sake right कि how do you like it right so pixels में we can define font size right then text align center basically सारे text को center कर सकता है इसमें we have different property as well, like left so सारा content will shift to left we also have right so all the content will just shift to right right and we also have justify right so it is like a newspaper ki it will basically it becomes a little bit interactive ki it will adjust itself as you can see right personally Here I think center works the best, right? When we have background which is black, we can change it to any color. We can change it to red. We can change it to, let's say, green, or you know what, gold, if you want, right? And we can change it to black, right? And the color, so background defines the background color, and color defines the color of the text, right? So if I from line change it to red, right, it will change to red. If and I can change line, or I can do line green, or I can do basically yellow, right? So that's how the color works, right? So let's now go for button, right? So okay, so right, control shift. Okay, right. So okay, so let me change it to green only. Okay, cool. So buttons. Okay, so line है ये वो, right? So for now buttons, we have the background as line, right? So यहाँ पर तुम देख सकते हो it is line. We have the color as black, basically the text color. Border none. Padding 10 pixel and 15 pixels, right? So font family यहाँ पर भी हमने मोनो रखी है. Font size हमने 30 pixels रखा है, and font weight हमने bold रखा है, right? इसको मैं अगर हटा दूँ तो यू सी दैट ये पतला हो गया, एंड इसको हम बोल्ड भी कर सकते हैं. फॉन्ट साइज को अगर मैं 30 से लेट से 20 पिक्सल्स कर दूँ तो वो छोटा हो जाएगा, एंड सिमिलरली अगर 30 का तो बड़ा हो जाएगा, राइट? दैट्स इट. सो या, राइट. सो स्टिल आवर गेम वर्क्स फंक्शनली सेम, राइट? इट्स जस्ट कि वो अब यहाँ पर स्कोर्स इट बिकम्स बेटर, राइट? So now what we want is we want to build a basically border around it, right? So what we'll do is we'll go to learning basically here, right? So इसका नाम हम rock paper scissors ले लेते हैं, rock paper and scissors. So अब अगर हम यहाँ पर देखें तो we want कि हमें यहाँ पर एक border box मिल जाए, right? So what we'll do is we will do class score area, right? And to catch it, as I told, that you want dot score area, right? Border box 1 pixel solid and line. So you see अब हमारा एक मिनट मैंने किसको दे दिया. ओके, सो here's the classic example जहाँ पर अब हम इसको div में wrap कर देंगे, राइट? ताकि ये पूरे इस पे आ जाए, राइट? सो अभी हमारा हो गया, राइट? नाउ वी नीड सम मार्जिन बेसिकली, राइट? क्योंकि ये यहाँ से चिपक रहा है, सो वी कैन डू मार्जिन 10 पिक्सल हर साइड से, राइट? तो हर साइड से हमें 10 पिक्सल मिल गया, एंड ये हमारा मार्जिन हो गया. एंड लेट द गेम बिगिन. सो यू पिक पेपर, कंप्यूटर पिक रॉक, you pick scissors, computer pick paper, right? So that's how our functional game works, and this is basically the CSS on styling this, right? अगर मैं इस सब को हटा दूँ, so you can see that our initial games look like this, and on adding this, our game, oh sorry, our game looks like this. So you can see कितना बड़ा difference CSS makes in basically you're developing a good website, right? A good user interface, a good looking user interface, right? So this was our project, right? So इसमें कोई doubt? No, that's a HTTP get. I don't know what he's saying. Enjoy. Yeah. What is padding? Okay, padding. Right, very cool. Right, so let me show you the box model for it. Right, for model. Right. So very good question by Supreme. Right, right. So padding basically is that you have some content. Then if you want some space between the content and the basically the div, that's called padding. Then you have the border, and then you have the margin. So this is what we call the box model, right? So this is what we call the box model, that you have the content, padding, border, margin, right? So if I basically in my code, if I increase the padding, you will see that the space between the box and the content will increase, right? So if I do this like 20 pixels and 25 pixels, right? Yeah. Now you see that the space increased, right? This space increased between the content and the button itself, right? And if I do redo this, right? So now you see that the space decreased, right? So that is what padding is. Yeah, Rajendra Parit says that without faces it looks like bone without skin, and that's exactly what the point is. That HTML is the bone structure. It is the structure. It is these, like this is a heading, this is a paragraph, this is basically some divs, and this is basically the buttons, right? And with CSS, it basically is a extra weird, right? All the functionality will work the same without CSS. Everything will look the same, or everything, but or it's just that everything won't look the same, right? So that's the actual difference, right? So that was the our whole game, right? So let me just show you how to put it on GitHub, right? So you just go to GitHub, right? You so I'll increase the size of my screen, right? So you click on new repository, right? So let's call it rock, paper, scissors, right? And add a description that this is a game made using JS and HTML, CSS, and JS, right? Make it private. You can add a link if you want, but you just create a repository, right? In it, and now GitHub itself will tell you how to basically add this to your repository, right? So you first need to git in it, right? So we'll go here, we'll go to the terminal, right? And I will just write git in it, right? So now my repository is in it, right? So I'll do git. So now what I need to do is I need to add this to my repository or commit it to my repository, right? So for that I will do git status, right? So this shows me all the files that are there in my basically my folder which are not yet committed, right? So first I need to add this, right? So for that I do git add, right? Learning or logic .js, right? And if I do now git status, you see that this file has been added and these all are remaining, right? So to add all of the basically untracked file, what we can do is we can simply do git add dot, right? We can add them one by one using this command, right? Basically, what I did, git add the previous command. What did I write? Git add logic, right? Basically, git add and then file them one and one by one. But we can also write git add dot to simply add all of the files, right? So now if I do git status, we see that all of the files are there. So now I can do git commit minus m to add a message. Right? So this message denotes that what am I doing to this file. So I'm adding the whole project. Now you see that these files have been committed. So git push origin main. Sorry, wait. Right. So let's just see. Okay, so we need to come to the main branch first, right? So we'll come to the main branch and then we'll do git remote add because this is the first time we are adding, right? And then we'll push to the branch, right? So now we have pushed the code. So if we go to this link now, right, you see that we have all of the code, right? So I will just add this here, right? So if I can, wait, how do I share this with you guys? Guys, can you see the HTML? Basically, if you go to this HTML, you can easily access the code, right? That is github.com slash Ankush with double h 08 slash rock, papers, and scissors. Rock dash paper dash scissors. If you go to this URL, I'm not able to share this with you guys, but if you go to this URL, you can easily view the code, right? So this was about basically our app, right? Is there any doubt? Are there any doubts? Okay, so MP Phoenix asks, can you use callback function and where to use it? So callback function is basically when a function accepts another function as a variable parameter. That's when we use callback function. Okay, so if there are no doubts, let's just continue with our slide presentation. Right, so let me go to this and do the slides. Yeah, right. So we made our project, right? So if you want to like basically go further, you can basically learn any JavaScript framework, React, Vue, or Angular, React, Vue, Angular, Svelte, right? I personally prefer React because like it has a lot of good stuff. It is really lightweight. right? In that you need to learn about all of this stuff, basically components, props, state event, hooks, and basically that pop-ups, right? And then you can build a package like this, right? So yeah. And other than that, you need to really learn about some extra stuff like data structure algorithms, system designs, or computer science fundamentals like operating system, computer networks, OPS, and DBMS, right? So to that, let me tell you about ACIO Jobs. ACIO Jobs provides a 6 month full stack web development training, right? It is a play after placement program where you are guaranteed a placement above 5 LPA. You can fill the form in the description to get a certificate of this class right here, and you can tag us on the LinkedIn and add the certificate, right? And you can also register to aciojob.com to attend such free live classes, right? So if you go to a job, you can register here to basically apply for the such free classes, right? And we have the top instructors, and our placements are up to 41 LPA as shown on the website, right? So you can do definitely check out aciojob.com, right? You can here see the placement report, the success stories. You can also look at the scholarship test. You can also apply for such live sessions, right? So if you have any questions or doubts, general doubts, any sort of doubts, you can ask them, and I'll be happy to answer. Uh, Suckleen, I'm so sorry if I'm saying this name wrong. Someone is asking to share the code on Discord. I cannot share it on Discord. You can basically go to this link and you will get it. Right, basically Ankush ANKUSH08 slash rock dash paper slash scissor dash scissor. Right. So here you can find the whole code for HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. I can actually, I'm not able to share the link. Let me just ask once. Let me just try to share it with someone else who can then share it with you. So Rajendra, pulses then will be the live session. You will be notified on the YouTube channel. Just say subscribe to it, and you will definitely receive the further communication there. You some guys want the PPT as well. I'll share the link for PPT as well with the contact person, and they might share it with you. Okay, guys, if you have any doubts, you can ask me, or else we can end it. Right? If you guys have any general doubts on basically data structure algorithms or web development, on any, you want any tips or stuff like that where you got stuck, you can definitely ask me. Right? Feel free to ask me anything, anything in like job interview prep if you want to ask. That's fine as well. Okay, so Rajendra Parith has asked me to introduce myself. So I'm so sorry if I haven't already. My name is Ankush. I'm currently an engineer at ShareChat, and I work in the revenue team. Right, so basically I make ads for publishers that want to showcase their ads on basically our app, right? So we have ShareChat app, we have the Moj app, and also the Tap app, right? So I work there as a software engineer, right? And I also enjoy competitive programming. I was in the top 5 percentile in the Google Kickstart program, right? I got top 500 AIR in that contest, right? And I'm also a specialist on code forces. I'm a 4 star on code chef, really close to 5 star. Fingers crossed, hoping to be it this year. Right, I'm only 13 points shy of being a 5 star. So yeah, that's about me. I'll wait for 10-15 minutes and then we can maybe end this, right? If you guys don't have any doubts. Any doubts, guys? Any doubts? Okay, so Rohan Magade asked how to master DSA. I guess that you could do a couple of things. Right, first things first, that you could first start with learning all the basic stuff. Right, so for the basic stuff, you need to learn about arrays, strings, linked list, tag, queue, binary trees, binary search trees, hash map, heaps, graphs, and DP. Right, practice at least 10 questions for all of these topics that I've just mentioned, right? And then you need to start practicing randomly, right? Like initially start with knowing the tag of the topic and then start practicing randomly so that you don't know the tag of the topic, so your brain actually is forced to think that what is this question all about, right? And I would say give contest maybe on lead code, maybe on code today, any platform that you like, right? Because like it forces you to think in a time bound manner, right? And keep practicing. Like the more you practice DSA, the better you will get. I personally will be taking DSA classes here in Java, right? So that's about me. How can we practice on this project? Okay, so you can basically try to add more functionality to this project. You can maybe try to add animations to it, maybe a better CSS than I did, or other stuff like that. So is there any series, or I don't know about Angular. How we learn and practice. So like let's pick a topic, right? So is practice. Let's say you want to learn about binary trees, right? So pick binary trees, go to read code, start with easy problems, practice like 2 3 easy problems, then move on to the medium problems and to the hard problems, right? So that's how you learn and practice, right? If you like, at least try for half an hour on how to solve the problem, and if you get stuck, then look at the solution. Okay, so Prajna says that how to talk confidently in an interview when you don't know the answer. So my tip to it would be it's okay if you don't know the answer. Don't try to fool the interviewer. Never, ever, ever try to fool the interviewer. They are very smart. That's why they are the interviewer. So always like either admit that you don't know the question, or try to answer as much as you know confidently. Right? Don't try to like overconfidence yourself into a situation where you get really stuck and then the interview might grill you. Right? So don't let it be that situation. Okay, so Nilash says to explain the JS code. Let me just share my screen again. So she does this. Right. So it's pretty simple. Right. Initially, what I have done is I've got all the buttons. Then I have the result area. Then I have the basically the two divs showing the score, right? Then I have basically initiated two variables, my score, our score basically, and the computer score, right? Then we have a function for game engine where we pass our move, right? It can be either rock, paper, or scissors, right? Then we are generating a random move using the inbuilt functionalities, right? And then we are basically playing the game here. That if I am choosing paper, then and the computer is choosing scissor or rock, or basically the game map, basically the how the logic of the game is being implemented here. Then we update basically what each one picked and what each one score was, right? Now these are all the event listeners, right? If we click on rock button, then something is initiated. Similar for scissor button and paper button, right? So the this was about the JS code. Any other questions? I'm also asking to add the basically the slides and the GitHub code in the description. I'm asking the contact person to add basically the slide that I showed you and the GitHub link in the description itself. It will be added, guys. Don't worry. Any doubt, guys? Else we'll end this. Right? If you guys have any doubts, do let me know about DSA or about anything. Okay, so Bhanu says, can you please say the best one form to get logical questions to practice? on web developing. Okay, so for that you can actually try out, like, I guess, for backend I guess there aren't, but for frontend you can actually try out frontendmentors.io. They give you basically these challenges with like the Figma link and the assets, and you have to build that, right? So you can definitely try out. No, Akash, it is not necessary to remember the code. You have to just remember how to do stuff, right? It is not like or you know what, just Google it, like whatever you want to do, just Google that, and you will definitely get close to it, right? So like for even like you should know the basics, right? And then everything else you can just Google and see, right? But you should know how to do stuff. Okay, so I guess there aren't any doubts. I'm still waiting. If you guys have any doubts, do let me know. I'm here for another 10-15 minutes. Thank you, Prajna, thank you, Monica. I really hope everyone enjoyed their time. I really hope everyone learned something new, right? Definitely, that's the biggest thing. So, yeah, I'm just waiting for your for doubts. If you guys have any, do let me know. Any doubts, guys? Anything goes here. Like you can ask me anything if you have. I'll clear it. Thank you so much. Thank everyone is here typing. Thank you so much for joining in. Thank you for staying this long. It's been like 2 hours now, and like you guys are still here, so that's pretty great, right? I really hope like everyone understood everything. If we rewatch it, it can be yes, definitely Supreme Ravi. You would be able to rewatch it and rebuild it, right? Just follow the steps that I did, and you will be able to rebuild it. Thank you. Any doubts, guys? If you, I'm still for another couple of minutes. If you have guys have any doubts, do let me know. I've asked the contact person to add the basically the code and the slide link in the description itself, so you can find it there. Thank you, Susanta. It's my pleasure. It's my pleasure to be here in front of you guys. I'm so thankful to all of you for joining in. It really makes my heart go happy, and thank you so much for joining in, guys. It was a really awesome session. Okay, so we got it out. I started HTML CSS JavaScript at age 30, not on the channel today. Okay, Amit. So congrats on starting on this new journey, right? Just keep learning. You can try to build this project, right? If you have any doubts, you can ping in the comment section. I'll definitely look at the doubts there, right? And just keep learning and just keep building. I really hope you understand it, right? All right, guys. So once again, thank you for joining. Do subscribe to the ACO Jobs channel for more such content. And my name is Ankush, and I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye.